From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
There are a lot of people, a lot of powerful people, who want to clamp down on the internet. And to be honest, there aren't a whole lot who have a vested interest in protecting it from all of that.
The words of the late internet visionary Aaron Swartz. Outrage is growing over the Justice Department's prosecution of the 26-year-old who committed suicide last week, just weeks before he was to go on trial for downloading millions of academic articles. As the chief prosecutor defends her actions, we speak to Aaron Swartz's girlfriend, Taryn Steinbrückner-Kaufman, and computer security consultant Alex Stamos, who would have been the chief expert witness for the defense. Then Tavis Smiley hosts a major summit on poverty.
When people have no hope for the future, they have no power in the present. Something must be done to save this democracy by doing something about this growing gap between the have-gots and the have-nots, about this gap between the rich and the rest of us. And we're going to keep pushing the president lovingly, respectfully, but keep talking about this issue.
As President Obama prepares for his second inauguration, broadcaster Tavis Smiley calls on the White House to prioritize the fight against poverty in Obama's second term. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's formally unveiled his proposals to reform the nation's gun laws more than a month after the shooting massacre in Newtown. On Wednesday, Obama called for reinstating the ban on assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines, expanding background checks for gun buyers, improving the delivery of mental health services, and allowing schools to hire up to 1,000 school resource officers and counselors. Obama presented his plan alongside Vice President Joe Biden, who headed the White House task force appointed after Newtown.
In the month since 20 precious children and 6 brave adults were violently taken from us at Sandy Hook Elementary, more than 900 of our fellow Americans have reportedly died at the end of a gun. 900 in the past month. And every day we wait, that number will keep growing. So I'm putting forward a specific set of proposals based on the work of Joe's task force. And in the days ahead, I intend to use whatever weight this office holds to make them a reality.
The White House plan is expected to meet stiff resistance from House Republicans, even some Senate Democrats in states with loose restrictions on firearms. In a statement, the National Rifle Association vowed to challenge Obama with what it called, quote, the fight of the century. In his remarks, Obama called on the American people to help him push gun control through Congress.
This will not happen unless the American people demand it. If parents and teachers, police officers and pastors, if hunters and sportsmen, if responsible gun owners, if Americans of every background stand up and say, enough, we've suffered too much pain and care too much about our children to allow this to continue, then change will come.
In a statement, the nation's leading gun control advocacy group, the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, endorsed the plan, saying the White House has exhibited, quote, tremendous leadership in its comprehensive policy recommendations to address gun violence. The American Civil Liberties Union, meanwhile, expressed concern about Obama's call for more police officers in schools, saying, quote, we fear neutral-sounding safety policies such as putting more cops in schools will lead to the over-incarceration of school-age children, especially students of color and students with disabilities, who are disproportionately arrested and prosecuted for issues that would normally be handled by school administrators. You can go to our website at democracynow.org for a debate on the issue of armed officers in schools from Wednesday's broadcast, as well as our other coverage of President Obama's gun control plan. The judge overseeing the pretrial hearing of alleged Army whistleblower Bradley Manning has ruled the government must prove Manning wanted to aid the enemy, as prosecutors have alleged. On Wednesday, Colonel Denise Lynn told prosecutors to prove Manning knew or should have known the documents he's accused of passing to WikiLeaks would end up being seen by members of al-Qaeda. Lynn also granted a defense request to present evidence that Manning carefully selected documents he knew would not harm the United States. Mannings previously offered to plead guilty to releasing the documents if the government drops its most serious charges, including aiding the enemy. Also Wednesday, defense attorneys tried to argue for the case's dismissal on the grounds Manning has been denied the right to a speedy trial. By the time his trial begins in June, Manning will have been in detention for more than 1,100 days, nearly 10 times the maximum allowed by military rules between arrest and trial. A group of foreign and Algerian workers have been taken hostage in Algeria in what their kidnappers call retaliation for the French bombing of neighboring Mali. The standoff is being described as one of the biggest international hostage crises in decades. In Washington, State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland confirmed Americans are among the group.
The best information that we have at this time is that U.S. citizens are among the hostages. I hope you will understand that in order to protect their safety, I'm not going to get into numbers, I'm not going to get into names, I'm not going to get into any further details as we continue to work on this issue with the Algerian authorities and also with their employers.
Algerian troops have now reportedly surrounded the complex where the hostages are being held. The government of Algeria had previously warned against French intervention in Mali and has now sealed off their shared border. The hostage crisis in Algeria comes as French troops have launched ground operations inside Mali days after their bombing campaign began. According to the New York Times, unnamed U.S. officials say the incident in Algeria could mark the beginning of a wave of regional attacks on foreigners, and that if the American hostages are harmed, then the Obama administration might reconsider its pledges not to commit ground troops to the battle in Mali. The Obama administration, meanwhile, is preparing to recognize the government of Somalia for the first time in more than 20 years. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is expected to formally make the announcement in a meeting with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed in Washington. The move will come just days after the U.S. took part in a failed attempt by France to rescue a captured secret agent inside Somali territory. The U.S. military has confirmed it's halted the transfer of detainees to some Afghan prisons over ongoing abuses, including torture. The Obama administration's resumed the transfers last year after pausing them in the wake of a 2011 United Nations investigation that found widespread abuses. Despite its qualms with the Afghan military's handling of detainees, the U.S. continues to hold prisoners without charge or trial at Afghanistan's Bagram prison. The United Nations says it's received permission from Syria to expand efforts to feed the estimated 2.5 million people suffering from hunger during Syria's internal crisis. On Wednesday, World Food Programme Executive Director Erthrin Cousin says collaboration with local partners could mean the delivery of aid to an additional 1 million Syrians.
Last week, we were given a list of 110 additional NGOs that we can now work with. 110. We have assessed the operational capacity of that 110, and we have identified 44 NGOs on that list that will give us the ability to scale up to another 1 million persons.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has taken what's being described as a subtle dig at President Obama following widespread reports of a rift between the two. Bloomberg News has recently reported Obama chided Netanyahu's government in private, apparently saying, quote, Israel doesn't know what its own best interests are, and expressing the view that Netanyahu is a political coward. Visiting an Israeli army base on Wednesday, Netanyahu appeared to respond.
I think everyone understands that only Israeli citizens will be the ones who determine who loyally represents the State of Israel's vital interests. In the past 4 years, we have faced tremendous pressures. We were demanded to restrain pressure against Iran, to withdraw to the 1967 borderlines, to divide Jerusalem, that we won't build in Jerusalem. We repelled those pressures, and I shall continue to protect Israel's vital interests for the sake of the security of Israel's citizens.
Despite talk of a rift between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Obama has yet to take any action on one of the most controversial settlement expansions by the Israeli government in years. Israel's now expanding the E1 settlement in the West Bank after putting it on hold since objections were raised under George W. Bush. The E1 zone is particularly sensitive because it would completely bisect the West Bank, dashing whatever remote hopes remain for a two-state solution. But the Obama administration has refused to cut aid or even offer criticism, limiting its reaction to calling the E1 expansion, quote, counterproductive. New details have been revealed on the Obama administration's weapons sales to Bahrain during the ruling monarchy's ongoing crackdown on opposition protesters. The website ProPublica reports the U.S. has sold weaponry including ammunition, combat vehicle parts, communications equipment, Black Hawk helicopters, and an undisclosed missile system to Bahrain since the protests began nearly 2 years ago. It's unclear if all the purchases were delivered, but they provide a key window into the extent of U.S. support for the Bahraini regime as it faced international condemnation for repressing dissent. Although the weapons are supposed to only be used for self-defense, some may have been used against civilian demonstrators. Bahraini helicopters reportedly fired on protesters in March 2011. Around the same time, Bahrain made a helicopter-related acquisition from the United States. A group of leading climate scientists has renewed calls for President Obama to reject the Keystone XL pipeline as he nears a decision in his upcoming second term. Obama will soon decide whether to allow the company TransCanada's plan to move tar sands oil from Canada to refineries in the Gulf Coast after putting off a decision until after the 2012 campaign. In an open letter, the scientists, including NASA climatologist James Hansen, write, quote, "We hope as scientists that you will demonstrate the seriousness of your climate convictions by refusing to permit Keystone XL. To do otherwise would be to undermine your legacy," unquote. The letter was released by the group 350.org, which is organizing a major President's Day rally in Washington next month to oppose the pipeline. A recent study in Canada, meanwhile, has found the development of the tar sands in the province of Alberta has led to increased levels of carcinogenic compounds in surrounding lakes and a wider contamination than previously known. Canadian government-backed researchers say deposits of cancer-causing chemicals have grown steadily since major oil sands production began in 1978. Indigenous-led protests continued across Canada Wednesday with a national day of action to address the state of living conditions for First Nations. Among a series of actions, hundreds of natives slowed traffic on the Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit with the neighboring Canadian town of Windsor, Ontario. The protests were held in solidarity with the Idle No More movement, an Indigenous-led effort to protest the federal government's treatment of Native peoples and its record on the environment. Europe, India, the U.S. and Japan have all grounded Boeing's new 787 Dreamliner jets over safety concerns following a series of incidents. The Federal Aviation Administration ordered all 787s taken out of service Wednesday, and European officials followed suit today. The 787 is Boeing's newest jet, and the company is reportedly depending heavily on its success. It suffered from several issues, including a fire on a plane parked in Boston and the emergency landing of a jet in Japan that had burn marks around its main battery. And today marks the 100th birthday of the legendary media activist Everett Parker. Active for more than 6 decades, Parker's best known for spearheading the challenge to Mississippi television station WLBT in the 60s, which ultimately had its license revoked for attempting to squelch the voices of the civil rights movement. In a 2008 interview with Democracy Now!, Everett Parker discussed his efforts to monitor racist television networks as founder of the Office of Communication of the United Church of Christ.
I went down and I really looked at stations throughout this, from New Orleans to the East Coast and found that it was a very bad situation. And I had earlier, teaching at Yale Divinity School, I had developed a new way of monitoring television stations.
Reverend Everett Parker identified the KKK-backed WLBT as a frequent target of public complaints and FCC reprimands regarding its public service. He filed a petition to deny renewal with the FCC, initiating a process that eventually got the station's license revoked by a federal court and had far-reaching consequences in American broadcasting. Happy birthday today to Everett Parker, who is 100 years old. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. And I wish my happy birthday to Everett Parker, a real pioneer in media reform in this country. And in fact, in my book, News for All the People, I devote a lot of time to that issue of what was done in Mississippi television in the 1950s and 60s. And people don't realize the impact that that had, not only on broadcast reform, Amy, but also on the ability of citizens to appeal to to have standing to question regulations of government agencies. That really opened up the ability of citizens to appeal to the government on regulations affecting a variety of issues, not just broadcasting. So it was a real pioneering effort that joined the civil rights movement and the media reform movement, and a great victory in WLBT back then.
And being run then by the civil rights movement instead of the KKK. And one of the first voices heard afterwards, right, was Medgar Evers, who would soon be assassinated outside his home, the great civil rights leader. And interestingly, on Monday, for President Obama's inauguration, it's Myrlie Evers, Medgar Evers' widow, who will be giving the convocation.
Yes. Well, we begin.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.